Hello and welcome back to Black Dice Gaming. So today we've got a painting tutorial. It's how I painted the Dungeons and Lasers Ogre from the Deceptive Encounters box set. It's an absolutely lovely model, painted up absolutely amazingly, as they all do, to be fair, for the Dungeons and Lasers models. They're all very, very good. All take paint very well. I've done it in a slap chop style, like I've done all my Dungeons and Lasers, so I'm just continuing with that sort of theme, so that they all sort of make sense together. They're all coherent, if you like. But without further ado, let's get into the painting tutorial, where you can learn how I did it, and then either copy it or do something completely different. Okay, so kicking straight off, we're going to be using Gulliman's Flesh for the flesh on the model, and we're just going round. Gulliman's Flesh it is. It didn't really leave a light flesh tone, so you may want to do some dry brushing or some highlighting on this if you are following my methods exactly. But it's a nice colour. It does exactly what it's supposed to do. It does turn it a very dark flesh, especially on the slap chop undercoat, which as always is black, followed by a dry brush of basalt grey, and then a dry brush again of ice white from Vallejo. So yeah, we're just going around now. We're getting all the flesh areas. There's quite a lot of flesh on the model. Just be careful around the mouth and the teeth area. You don't particularly want to get any of that on the teeth, because it's slightly darker than the colour that we will be using for those later on. So moving on to the second colour. For that I used Barl Red, which is a lovely contrast paint. I always use slightly lighter colours than I sort of intend the finish to be, because of the darkness of the slap chop, but this came out really well. It was a really nice paint to put on, and we've just gone around and done all the cloth, which is mainly on its back, but there is some on its front and around the arms as well. There's some sort of cloth areas underneath his other wrappings. We just picked them out in the red as well. Again, if you want to highlight this, I don't, but if you want to highlight this, I'd use something like Evil Sunz Scarlet on the edges, and it would really make it pop. Moving on now to the wrappings. Now, we used three different colours here. I used Gorgunter Fair on what I was assuming was like leather, mainly its feet, and some of the sort of leather straps around his arms. And so this is the Gorgunter Fair, which dries a lot lighter than it looks like it would. So yeah, mainly concentrating on that foot down at the bottom that has some wrapping around it. Only one of them does, and then the other wrapping around his arms. Not the straps, but the actual wraps themselves. You could easily cut one of these colours out, to be fair, and just do the other sort of leather straps on his armour in the Gorgunter Fair as well. So I used three different browns, but you could easily just get away with using two if you wanted to. Just being careful here not to get it on the other wrappings, because they're going to be a lighter colour, just so they stand out a little bit more. But yeah. And then the second brown that we're using is for the wood, and for that we are using Wildwood, which is a slightly darker brown. then there's just the wood on the axe, and then there's a shield on the base which I painted in the wildwood as well. So this shouldn't take too long, this step. Just being really careful around his fingers and the wrapping on his arms there. And then yeah, that shield on the base there, just by its other foot. And then last but not least, I used snakebite leather for the sort of leather belts and straps around his armor. Again, you can use one of the other colours for this. You don't have to use the third colour if you didn't want to. I had it to hand, and I quite like snakebite leather, especially for leather straps, so that's why I used it. Moving on now, we're using Skeleton Horde, and that's for all of the sort of teeth or claws or whatever they are that are sort of piercing his skin, and other things like straps around his arms. That's what I'm doing here. So those straps that are tying everything together, I use the Skeleton Horde for those. There are some skeleton parts and skulls on his base. Also, that's the rope that is around his waist. I'm using it on that as well. And then his teeth, obviously, in his mouth as well. Again, these probably could do with a little highlight of something like bleached bone or morghast bone, something like that, depending on how far you want to push them. Sorry, I'm completely out of the camera here. I didn't realise that. Yeah, just anywhere that's sort of bandages or bone or teeth or anything like that. This gets the Skeleton Horde treatment. So this is where I picked out he's got like a little orb in the middle of his belt, and I picked that out in I think it was Leviathan purple. I'm pretty sure it was. It's just to add a different colour to the model. But moving on now to the metallics. For that I used Iron Hands Steel, and it's a kind of very heavy dry brush where I'm sort of catching almost everything. To call it a dry brush is probably a stretch of the word, to be fair. I'm not particularly going for neatness or 100% coverage, but trying just to cover most of it, if not all of it. I mean, you can definitely be a lot neater if you wanted to than I was, but I'm really just sort of going for the colour, not trying to block it out or anything like that. So as you can see, I did the axe head and then the metal plate on his I was going to call it chest plate, but it's more on his stomach. So just did that as well. It does have some sort of studs on the part of his bracer there, so I've just painted those in as well. And there's a couple of bits on the base. I think there's a sword, if I remember rightly, and then the edging of the shield that we did earlier on. I just did those in the metallic as well. Just tidying everything up now before we move on to the next stage. Oh, sorry, there is some chainmail on his back. I've just remembered that. Some chainmail hanging down his back, so I gave that a coat of the Iron Hand Steel as well. So now we're doing a similar sort of thing, but this time I used Brass Scorpion, and we're just picking out the sort of skull feature on the front armour there. And again, we're not going particularly for whole coverage. In fact, if a little bit of silver is showing through, that will help give the impression that it is worn. There's a couple of things on that rope there hanging down. Is like a clasp and a couple of little trinkets. I'm also colouring those in that brass as well. Getting a little bit more coverage on those than I am the skull. Ideally we do want some of the silver, especially on the edges, showing through, just to give it that sort of worn look. And then we're moving on with the Null Oil, and I'm just going over the metallics. All of the metallics, even the brass and the silver. Just making sure that it runs into all the recesses, just to create that definition between the two colours, but also the shading that a good wash can give you. The axe is quite worn, so the Null Oil runs right into the recesses where you want it to be. And there's a little bit of detail on the edge of the weapon there, which really comes out with that Null Oil wash. And then obviously leaving this to dry now. It takes a little while, slightly longer than most things. I did manage to do this in just an evening's painting, so it shouldn't really take too long at all. But as always, there's no real need to rush. Yeah, and then just doing the bits on the base, which probably require a little bit of shading as well. And there we are. This is the finished article. I would like, if I do go back to the model, which I might do at some point, then I will probably do a little bit more on the highlighting. As I've mentioned during the video, highlighting the flesh because it is quite dark, and maybe even that red could benefit from a nice highlight. But there we are. There's the ogre in all of its glory. Please like, share, comment what I can do better, or what you've enjoyed about the video. And hopefully I shall catch you in the next one.